Okay. All right, Kelly, go ahead. Here we go. Here's another one.
Hello, sir. Thank you very much.
We got them all today.
Okay. So, Mr. President, you talked about expecting some on-the-ground assessments at Fordo and other sites.
Now here,
is that
here
Israeli and U.S.?
It's been obliterated, Kelly. It's been
What is your message then, sir, to the intelligence community when they present reports? You're not disputing the DIA report. You're just
They presented a report that wasn't finished. We're talking about something that took place 3 days ago.
I understand that, sir.
The report was done
so
2
what
days
is
ago. Wait a minute.
Yes.
They didn't see it. All they can do is take a guess. Now, if you take a look at the pictures, if you take a look how it's all blackened, you know the fire and brimstone is all underground because it's granite and it's all underground. You don't show it. But even there, with all of that being said, the whole area for 75 yards around the hole where it hit is black with fire. The group that's run by this gentleman, in fact, you may want to talk about it for a second because we're going to issue a report. And I think it's not even a very exciting report at this point. It's been obliterated, totally obliterated. And they did a report, but it was like, if you look at the dates, it's just a few days after it happened.
Sir.
So they didn't see it. They said it may be very severe.
Understood. Do you have a message for the intelligence community, though, in terms of unvarnished information getting to you, that it's not
I don't really have a message. I would say issue the report when you know what happened. I wouldn't say that it could be severe or maybe not. They use the word severe. It could be severe or maybe it's not.
And briefly,
so people like you picked up and said, oh, it's not severe.
We're just looking for
the report was not a complete report. Yeah, the message was probably wait till you know the answer before you.
And sir, did you not have a public component to your Zelensky meeting for a tactical reason with President Putin?
Let him answer this.
Hello, Mr. Secretary.
Yeah. There's a reason the president calls out fake news for what it is. These pilots, these refuelers, these fighters, these air defenders, the skill and the courage it took to go into enemy territory flying 36 hours on behalf of the American people and the world to take out a nuclear program is beyond what anyone in this audience can fathom. And then the instinct of CNN, the instinct of the New York Times is to try to find a way to spin it for their own political reasons to try to hurt President Trump or our country. They don't care what the troops think. They don't care what the world thinks. They want to spin it to try to make him look bad based on a leak. Of course, we've all seen plenty of leakers. And what do leakers do? They have agendas. And what do? Do they share the whole information or just the part that they want to introduce? And when they introduce that preliminary, a preliminary report that's deemed to be a low assessment, you know what a low assessment means? Low confidence in the data in that report. And why is there low confidence? Because all of the evidence of what was just bombed by 12 30,000-pound bombs is buried under a mountain, devastated and obliterated. So if you want to make an assessment of what happened at Fordo, you better get a big shovel and go really deep because Iran's nuclear program is obliterated. And somebody somewhere is trying to leak something to say, oh, with low confidence, we think maybe it's moderate. Those that dropped the bombs precisely in the right place know exactly what happened when that exploded. And you know who else knows? Iran. That's why they came to the table right away, because their nuclear capabilities have been set back beyond what they thought were possible because of the courage of a commander-in-chief who led our troops, despite what the fake news wants to say.
But you're not disputing the report said what it said, even though it was initial.
The report said what it said, and it was fine. It was severe, they think, but they had no idea. They shouldn't have issued a report until they did. But we've gotten the information. I think Pete said it better than you can say it. And, you know, you should be proud, you, especially you, should be proud of those pilots, and you shouldn't be trying to demean them.
No,
those pilots flew at great risk, a big chance that they'd never come back home and see their husbands or their wives. Let me just tell you, you and NBC, fake news, which is one of the worst, and CNN, New York Times, are all bad. They're sick. There's something wrong with them. But you know what? You should be praising those people instead of trying to find some. By getting me, by trying to go and get me, you're hurting those people. They were devastated. You know, I got a call from Missouri, great state, that I won 3 times by a lot. And I got a call that the pilots and the people on the plane were devastated because they were trying to minimize the attack. And they all said it was hit. But we don't think it was really maybe hit that badly. And they were devastated. They put their lives on the line, and then they have, and I'm not referring to you, but real scum come out and write reports that are as negative as they could possibly be. It should be the opposite. You should make them heroes and heroines. You should make them really people that they were so devastated when they heard this news. And you know what they said? One of them, I spoke to one of them, said, "Sir, we hit the site. It was perfect. It was dead on," because they don't understand fake news, because they have a normal life, except they have to fly very big, very fast planes. But it's a shame. You should be making them heroes. All right.
Now let's go to RNC Senior Advisor Danielle Alvarez. And Danielle, Rebecca really hit the nail on the head on a lot of the Iran-Israel part of this. I want to go to the reason that Donald Trump is there to begin with. The reason, just a few seconds ago, we saw him taking a picture with the Secretary General. It obviously is this, as we watch right now on the screen live, the makings of the family photo as all the world leaders get into place. Danielle, the reason we are here is because Donald Trump told these world leaders, you need to raise your defense spending to 5%. They did it. The Secretary General, in comments we heard within the last half hour, 45 minutes, said multiple times this would not have happened without Donald Trump. What did the election in 2016 of Donald Trump and the re-election last year mean for our world's safety going forward, for your kids, for my kids, for our grandkids, for future generations?
This is the first chapter in a book titled Peace Through Strength, where the entire world and certainly the American people are grateful for the mandate that was delivered in November. Every single battleground state, the popular vote, the House, the Senate, and the entire world are grateful for the leadership of President Donald J. Trump, which is a stark contrast to the weakness we saw in our nation and on the world stage from President Joe Biden. Obviously, this weekend's going against Iran was a huge success. We're very grateful to the members of the military who executed that strike, but certainly grateful to President Trump because he walked into NATO this weekend with a huge win. And again, peace through strength, the focus there being on peace. He's able to now gather in this family photo. What a great image on screen right now. He's able to gather this family photo, and he's able to bring these nations together to increase defense spending. And as he always promised, make sure everyone pays their fair share.
Yeah, and we see the president. He's standing next to the NATO Secretary General and the UK Prime Minister Keir Starmer taking part in this family photo. We see some smiles there among the world leaders. We're going to listen in for just a second, see if we can catch what anybody's saying. No. All right, yeah, we couldn't hear anything that they said, but they took the family picture, and then they're going to be going off to NATO meetings that are going to last several hours before President Trump takes part in a press conference that's expected at 9 a.m. Eastern time. So he's going to be answering even more questions, making even more news from this NATO summit. And speaking of making news, one of the things that was announced is that the FBI is going to be investigating this leak of the intel report, this initial analysis of Operation Midnight Hammer that Secretary Hegseth described as politically motivated. What more can you tell us about that?
Well, I'm going to echo the words of Press Secretary Caroline Leavitt. It's an absolute embarrassment that there was a leak. I think that this is part of the deep state that the president has been saying that he's going to clean up. I am happy to hear that there's going to be investigations into this leak. This mission was so critical. I was actually having breakfast with my husband the other morning, who served in the United States Marine Corps, and what he was describing to me, the ability for these pilots, for these individuals who trained for this mission, to go without radio communication for 40 hours, how tight-lipped this was, how people kept this very quiet so that we could execute and again obliterate these 3 nuclear sites, make sure that Iran does not have a nuclear weapon and nuclear capabilities. I think that was a huge success and a celebratory moment, but I am certainly glad that we are going to look into who is leaking.
The president going on to say, to this point, Danielle, if the strike wasn't successful, Iran would not have agreed to the ceasefire. Marco Rubio, Secretary of State, doubling down on your comments, calling the individuals that leaked this document professional stabbers, going on to say they read it and characterize it for you in a way that is false. So I think that underscores how seriously the administration is taking this. But globally, even though Donald Trump and his administration have been brought in to root out the deep state, I think we could all agree that this administration is finding it is not an easy task to root out the deep state. Your thoughts on that?
I think that's exactly right. There are individuals who have been entrenched in Washington, D.C. and in the Beltway, and we have to eradicate those individuals from the system. But again, I really want to focus on the success of the United States in this mission. The entire world was watching. The entire world saw the might and strength of the United States military and is grateful. We saw the immediate ceasefire. As you mentioned, Iran immediately put their hands up, agreed to the ceasefire. They want to see peace, and that could only be done because President Trump is our commander-in-chief. President Trump is in the White House, and in that Situation Room, great decisions were made, and we now have a peaceful, more prosperous world.
And Daniel, final question to you, because NATO 5's NATO Article 5 guarantee, obviously says an attack on one nation is an attack on all. And yesterday, the president was asked if he's committed to that, and he says it depends on your definition. There are numerous definitions of Article 5, but I'm committed to being their friends. I'm committed to saving lives. Can you tell us a little bit more about what he meant by that? It depends on your definition.
President Trump's mentality is America first. He's always going to put the American people and our nation first. It's a promise that he made throughout his first campaign, throughout his first administration, throughout the recent campaign. And he's made that promise in the months since being elected and sworn in as our president. And so I think that we can take him at his word. He is always going to put America first. He is always going to make decisions that are going to make sure that we are safe, that we are prosperous first and foremost. And so I think that we will have allies. I think that we will certainly be a team player, but the president is not going to go into needless wars as demonstrated by this weekend strikes and the immediate ceasefire that came in the aftermath.
Danielle Alvarez, thank you for sticking with us this morning for your insight on the major happenings overseas. We appreciate it. Let's bring in Hudson Institute Senior Fellow Rebecca Heinrichs. And Rebecca, I'm sure you were listening to the president's press conference there last hour. Lasted about 20 to about 30 minutes. A lot was covered. The number one takeaway I think a lot of us had was about what NATO is going to do going forward, but we cannot look past his comments on what happened with regard to the bombing in Iran over the weekend. Saying statements as to the future, phrases like they are not going to enrich. The last thing they want to do is enrich. They are not going to do it again, and I think they've had it. What do you make of the president's comments on Iran's willingness and capability to develop a nuke in the future?
Well, look, I mean, you can only take care of the problems immediately in front of you. And so we took care of the Iranian nuclear program just a few days ago. If the Iranians are so foolish as to make more problems for us, I have no doubt that President Trump will take care of that problem as well. Look, I think this is a big deal. I think that this is a really big deal that President Trump took decisive action, demonstrated incredible military power and military capability to take out the Iranian nuclear program. And also, it gives President Trump and the United States a lot of credibility that we will do what we say we're going to do. You were talking about NATO. He's now at the NATO summit. NATO can be confident that the United States has the military capability and a president who has the will to say what he means if, in fact, you have a country that crosses us like the Iran regime did. And I think that that bolsters the credibility of NATO as well.
Understood. Here's more of what the president had to say just moments ago.
Very good. I think very good. Israel came back yesterday. I was so proud of them. Because they came back, they went out because they felt it was a violation. And technically they were right, but it just wouldn't have worked out very well. And they brought the planes back. They had gone on to another journey because it was a little bit of a violation. And I said, you got to get them back. And they came back, and it was a great thing. And it's going very well.
So the president confirming that the Israel-Iran ceasefire is going well for now. And he made that phone call to Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu to call the planes back from a potential Iranian attack. While he was on the plane going to this NATO summit, he also said, Rebecca, during these remarks to the media, that he believes that the United States is going to have some form of relationship with Iran in the years to come after this current conflict is over. What do you think about that? It feels like the president is doing the carrot and stick method, where Iran certainly saw the stick, and now the president could be offering them the carrot.
Well, I think it's interesting. President Trump made the remark a few days ago that the United States does not have any permanent enemies. And so he's always looking for improvement between relations. I'm skeptical that the Iran regime is anywhere near the state of mind to move forward with a more positive relationship. But look, the option is still open. I do think it's important to note that even as President Trump tries to get the Israelis to stand down on some of the more aggressive air campaign against the Iranians, there still needs to be you still need to have Israelis inside the country doing private campaigns to make sure that they get any of the other illicit nuclear material out of Iran. So there's still going to be some military options, I think, going on inside Iran on the part of the Israelis. I think the United States would be extremely wise to support that. It's just that we're almost certainly not going to see these much more aggressive air campaigns that the Israelis have been so successful at carrying out thus far.
And on the left-hand side of your screen, Rebecca, the President of the United States, once again, now posing for a picture with, I believe, if my eyesight serves me, that is not Emmanuel Macron. I just need better glasses. Okay.
The NATO Secretary General.
Okay. Before we let you go, I want to ask your thoughts on this. Within the past few hours, the Iranian parliament voting to suspend cooperation with the IAEA. Is that significant, or was Iran's cooperation with the IAEA always tenuous at best?
Well, look, there's a lot of criticism from the expert community of President Trump that because he authorized and directed the United States to take out Iran's nuclear program, that the United States was in violation of international law. My response to that is we just enforced the non-proliferation treaty, which the Iranians were in violation of. So if the Iranians now decide that they're not going to cooperate with the IAEA, I say, look, that organization is there to conduct inspections of your nuclear program. You were already in violation of the non-proliferation treaty. So we'll see how this goes. I mean, I think right now we're going to hear a lot of, upset rhetoric from the Iran regime, understandably. I would like to see them comply with the IAEA, but we need to get the Iranians complying with all sorts of international norms of which they've been in violation to this point.
And we're hearing that all the world leaders are going to be gathering. They're going to be taking a family photo. I love that name.
Great name.
And we're going to be bringing you those images when they come in. But Rebecca, something else I wanted to ask you about is that Iranian media is reporting this morning that they have executed 3 Mossad spies, that they're describing them as Mossad spies that were living in Iran. And Iran is also saying that more than 700 people who they say were aligned with Israel have been arrested over the last 12 days. So 2 questions really come to mind when it comes to that. Could those actions by Iran impact the ceasefire that is very fragile and taking place right now? And also, could that create an uprising in Iran against the regime itself?
Well, I hope so, to answer your latter question. I mean, I think President Trump was right when a couple of days ago he said that essentially we would welcome a change in the regime in Iran. The Iranian people are the ones that are going to have to do it. You're not going to see, I think, pressure from the United States downward to try to make that happen. But clearly, we would want a secular regime that granted security and freedom and blessed the Iranian people, and did not oppress the Iranian people. That would be good for the United States. That would be good for them. They're the ones that have suffered more than any other person under this Iran regime that's really a jihadist regime and has been the most aggressive and active state sponsor of terrorism and instability throughout the Middle East. I think we're going to hear a lot of, again, bad things coming out of the Iran regime because they're flailing at this point. There's only so much they can do. But I think, we should expect to hear some pretty terrible things coming out saying that they are doing horrible things to the Iranian people and alleged Mossad spies. I certainly pray that is not the case.
Rebecca Heinrichs, thank you for your insight this morning. We appreciate it.
You are watching live video. That is the Prime Minister of the Netherlands with, of course, our President Donald Trump. They are at The Hague in the Netherlands for this for the NATO talks. We're going to continue to monitor this. I think we're going to listen in right now.
Have you seen it? Okay. Pretty good. Very unfair to the pilots that risk their lives for our country. and then they get fake news, New York Times and CNN, make up a phony story to get some hits. That's the only reason I cared about it, because those pilots were so brave. I've never seen anything like it. They flew into the hornet's nest, and then they got hurt so badly by what the fake news wrote. And it was CNN, it was the New York Times, and they're both disgusting, really horrible groups of people. The pilots did an unbelievable job like nobody's ever seen. They hit pay dirt. You see where I guess you probably look, they call it the wound. You see where the wound is on the earth, and 3 of them right next to each other. Perfect. And they should be admired and respected for what they did. And the fake news, in order to try and hit me, the fake news made them look bad, but now they look really good again. So that was the Israeli Atomic Energy Commission, and it was also about the High Commission of Iran, just said it was totally demolished. But we're going to have a news conference in a couple of minutes, and we'll see you, because I don't want to burden the Prime Minister with this. Okay? Thank you very much, everybody.
I want to bring in General Jack Keane to get his thoughts here. President Trump, I'm not going to play any sound right now since we just were able to hear from it and you listened to the entire thing. When it comes to Iran and being on its heels, and this intel assessment and how long it takes in order to understand what actually happened, what do you think about his answer there? Will that satisfy some of the critics who are trying to snipe at this effort?
Well, I think the evidence as it comes out will be quite overwhelming. I've been in contact with the Israelis, who are really the people on the ground taking a look at this. And they believe, based on their preliminary assessment, because it's the people on the ground that are going to make the most in-depth assessment of what is taking place here. And they haven't completed their assessment. And they believe the program is set back at least 2 years, if not longer, based on what took place at those sites. And obviously, they hit all 12 sites before we hit the major underground facilities here. And look at the DIA report. It was a preliminary report that had never reached the president yet. It has to go through a process with all the intelligence agencies coming together, making an assessment, and then bring that conclusion to the president. That has been truncated by the leak. So that process hasn't even been completed. And certainly the people are reporting on it, New York Times and CNN are trying to take advantage of it. I think this will simmer down at some point as the evidence is overwhelming in terms of the success of this operation. But let me say a couple of more points on this. The ceasefire, I would have liked to have seen it have some conditions, public conditions as well as private conditions, and that is that you are not going to rebuild your program, and if you do, Israel and the United States may have to stop it, and we will. I think that's implied, and the president certainly made statements to that effect here, so it cleared up any doubt of what we're dealing with. Let's face reality here. The regime that's in power in Iran has not changed. They're going to still want a nuclear weapon because they believe it protects them in terms of their survival. They will try to find a way to rebuild it. That's kind of who they are. They are steadfast in their resistance to the United States and Israel. And the United States certainly is committed to Israel here to make certain this doesn't happen. As Martha said, I mean, Iran is back on its heels in a way that they have never been in 45 years. They have lost their military capability. They've lost their nuclear program, much of their ballistic missile program, much of their leadership. And I think they've been politically weakened inside of their country, which makes them more vulnerable to maybe through violence and a coup changing the regime, or eventually the people themselves having a say about changing the regime. But nonetheless, I don't want to focus too much on regime change, but they're vulnerable to it in a way they haven't been. Then the second major point he made is deterrence. The United States, in focusing on destroying the end state of Iran's nuclear program with such a major, remarkable operation that was conducted here, our adversaries are looking at this, and they see the message. And that's the United States global leadership returning to the world stage and their willingness to confront adversaries. The other thing that makes this so important and critical is look at the proxies. None of them came to help Iran in a moment of desperation, particularly Hezbollah, who was organized with billions of dollars, 150,000 rockets and missiles to do principally one thing: defend Iran against Israel. They never fired a shot. Where is Russia and China in helping their partner in the Axis alliance? No help whatsoever except rhetoric. Iran is isolated here, and we have achieved the measure of deterrence. Both of those adversary countries need to know, and they got the message from President Trump: we are willing to confront your aggression and your ambitions when they're stepping on U.S. national interests. And that is hugely powerful message that is coming out of what we're saying here.
You are a man of strength, but you're also a man of peace. And the fact that you are now also successful in getting this ceasefire done between Israel and Iran, I really want to commend you for that.
NATO Secretary General Mark Rutte praising President Trump's diplomacy in the Middle East, and that's the mood back home as well. Georgia Congressman Buddy Carter formally nominating the president for the Nobel Peace Prize. Carter saying Trump's leadership in striking Iran and brokering a ceasefire deserves recognition. So we'll see how that goes.
And in the meantime, that ceasefire does appear to be holding after a pretty shaky start. Israel and Iran are both keeping their powder dry, at least for now. Mike Tobin is joining us live in Tel Aviv with the latest. Hi, Mike.
And, Bill, you've got all sides in this conflict claiming victory at this point. You've got President Trump in The Hague right now pushing back at the news agencies who have run reports that quoted an intelligence report suggesting that the U.S. damage or the damage done by the U.S. strikes is not as extensive as the president says they are. The Secretary of State is traveling with them, criticizing these news agencies for running reports that were generated by a leak.
This is what a leaker is telling you, the intelligence says. That's the game these people play. We dropped 12 of the strongest bombs on the planet right down the hole in 2 places. Everything underneath that mountain is in bad shape. Now, anything in the world can be rebuilt, but now we know where it is. And if they try to rebuild it, we'll have options there as well. But all this leaker stuff, these leakers are professional stabbers.
The IAEA chief, Rafael Grossi, says he wants to get inspectors on the ground to assess the damage, but he is in agreement with President Trump that Iran and its nuclear program are no longer the same. Hardline supporters of Iran's government gathered to rally in Tehran. Iran also executed 3 men they accuse of spying for Israel. They were convicted in an Iranian court of smuggling equipment used in an assassination. Meantime, Iranian President Masoud Pezeshkian is claiming victory and publicly expressing a desire to work out differences with the United States. Now, the Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu is also claiming victory, saying that 2 existential threats to the Jewish state are now gone: the ballistic missile arsenal of Iran and Iran's nuclear program. Bill,
and hopefully the people in Israel can finally take a breath now that they don't have missiles coming in every day. Mike Tobin, live in Tel Aviv. Thank you, Mike.
Let's bring in retired 4-star General Joseph Votel. He's a former CENTCOM commander, and it's so good to have you here today. Yesterday afternoon, the IAEA director was on with Martha McCallum. Take a listen to what he said. I want to get your take.
What we see is a very important degree of damage in the 3 facilities. Natanz, which was the first to be hit and sustained very, very serious damage in one of the important centrifuge halls where enrichment was being carried out. Although no one has been there inside to see, of course, the conclusion is that the damage must be, very, very, very important.
General, we can pull up the pictures here for the before and after, and our audience is getting used to seeing these. But I think what the IAEA director was saying is that we don't necessarily know for sure, but that he says that there has been a very important degree of damage. What are you hearing, or what do you know that can add to this conversation?
Yeah, thanks, Dana. It's great to be with you. Well, I think his statement certainly is an important one, and it certainly underscores the significance of our strike here and the fact that Iran's nuclear weapons capability is not the same today as it was just a week ago or just a few days ago. So I think that's an important assessment. And of course, he emphasized the importance of getting people on the ground to look at this. I think the thing that's most important for people to appreciate is this battle damage assessment process that has now become kind of something common to talk about. It really is a process, and it goes through certain phases. It starts with very simple initial assessments, and then it gets more into the detailed total system analysis. And when we look at that, we do value looking at getting information from people who have been on the ground, but we also look at other things like the effects of the Israeli strikes. For example, them going after things like the conversion plants or the manufacturing process. These are all really important things that have to be worked in to the total system damage assessment here that really tells us what the long-term impact of this is.
Yeah, yes, people are impatient, right? We are used to like ordering from DoorDash and getting it 10 minutes later. That's not how the intelligence will work. If you had to guess how much time is needed in order to fully assess and get a good sense?
It's going to be days to weeks, I think, in terms of this. Again, as soon as people can get on the ground and we can again look at all the information that's being collected, then the intelligence community, the Pentagon, will have the opportunity to to make a better assessment, I think, about what the impacts are. But I think it's very clear there's a significant amount of damage that has been done to the Iranian nuclear weapons program. I don't think there's any ability to dispute that. It's definitely different today than it was.
The CENTCOM commander nominee, who is going for the job, he testified on Capitol Hill yesterday about Iran as a danger overall. Watch.
I think we would all agree that Iran is the #1 source of instability in the region, the #1 source of and sponsor of terror throughout the world. At the strategic level, I think they've been weakened since the events of 7 October. At the tactical level, I think they've been degraded, deterring Iran and its proxies. I think that is a critical element of our national security. We've got to be in a 3-point stance, ready to go every single day.
Do you agree with that assessment, or would you have anything to add in terms of dangers in the region?
No, I do agree with that assessment. I think it's pretty accurate. Certainly, Iran has suffered some significant strategic setbacks. Their long-range, standoff weapons or ballistic missiles have taken a beating over the last 12 or 13 days. Their nuclear weapons program has been severely damaged. And of course, the third leg of their strategy are the proxies. We've seen what's happened to Hezbollah. We've seen what's happened to Hamas. We've done a lot of damage to the Houthis. They really haven't responded in this situation. We still have the Iranian militia groups in Iraq and in Syria, but they have not responded much. They may in fact be deterred by the actions that have been taken by the Israelis and by the Americans over the last several days. So that said, they still have the ability to put boats out into the Straits of Hormuz. They still have the ability to mine. They still have likely sleeper cells or operatives that can do damage out there, and they have a drone and cyber capability. So I don't think you can count Iran out here, although they have, I think, been strategically set back in a number of ways.
General Votel, thank you for joining us today.
Good to be with you.
Yes, please, go ahead. Go ahead. Oh, fake news, CNN? Oh, yeah, here we go. Wait till you hear this question.
Thank you, sir.
You should really say how great our soldiers and our warriors are.
I think everyone appreciates our soldiers and our warriors. I do have two questions for you, Mr. President. You just cited Israeli intelligence on these attacks. Earlier, you said U.S. intelligence was inconclusive. Are you relying on Israeli intelligence for your assessment of the impact of the strikes?
No, this is also Iran made the statement. And it's also, if you read the document that was given, that Pete can talk about if you'd like, the document said it could be very severe damage. But they didn't take that. They said it could be limited or it could be very severe. They really didn't know, other than to say it could be limited or it could be very, very severe. And you didn't choose to put that because it was very early after. Since then, we've collected additional intelligence. We've also spoken to people who have seen the site, and the site is obliterated. And we think everything nuclear is down there. They didn't take it out. Okay, question? Please, go ahead. Go ahead. Yeah, blue dress.
Thank you so much, Mr. President. Yesterday, you said China can now continue to purchase oil from Iran.
Yeah.
Are you giving up on your maximum pressure campaign? Because there are sanctions right now.
With who?
On Iran.
No, look, they just had a war. The war was fought. They fought it bravely. I'm not giving up. They're in the oil business. I mean, I could stop it if I wanted. I could sell China the oil myself. I don't want to do that. They're going to need money to put that country back into shape. We want to see that happen. Would it? No. If they're going to sell oil, they're going to sell oil. We're not taking over the oil. We could have, you know. I used to say with Iraq, keep the oil. I could say it here, too. We could have kept the oil. No, China is going to want to buy oil. They can buy it from us. They can buy it from other people. But you're going to have to put that country back into shape. It desperately needs money. Yeah.
Mr. President.
Yeah, please. Here we go. I'm picking the beauties today. Go ahead.
Mr. President, Secretary General Rutte has described President Putin as an adversary, a threat, an enemy. Do you view him the same way? And in addition to that, you mentioned General Kane, your chief of staff, the chairman of the Joint Chiefs of Staff.
General Kane.
Yes, he has said that Mr. Putin has territorial ambitions beyond Ukraine. Do you view that in the same way?
Possible. I mean, it's possible. I know one thing. He'd like to settle. He'd like to get out of this thing. It's a mess for him. He called the other day. He said, can I help you with Iran? I said, no, you can help me with Russia. Because, you know, in the last few weeks, we took care of India and Pakistan, Kosovo, Serbia. I think on Friday we have coming in, the Congo is coming in, and Rwanda is coming in. That was a vicious war that went on, a machete war, heads chopped off all over Africa. They're coming in. We did 2 others in addition to that. Nobody's ever done anything like this. No, I consider him a person that's, I think, been misguided. I'm very surprised, actually. I thought we would have had that settled easy. I've settled 4 of them in the meantime. But he did call up, and he said, you know, he's close to Iran. He'd like to help us get a settlement. I said, no, you help me get a settlement with Russia. And I think we're going to be doing that, too. Yeah.
The White House Press Secretary Caroline Leavitt for more on all of this. So the president really went off in The Hague in his news conference on reporting that these strikes may not have done the job here in Iran at the Fordo nuclear facility and others as well. He also took aim at the outlets that were reporting this. Listen here.
They said it could be limited or it could be very severe. They really didn't know, other than to say it could be limited or it could be very, very severe. And you didn't choose to put that because it was very early after. Since then, we've collected additional intelligence. We've also spoken to people who have seen the site, and the site is obliterated. And we think everything nuclear is down there. They didn't take it out.
So this is a report from the DIA that Fox has confirmed. It was, quote, preliminary and expressed low confidence in the findings. And yet it was all over the news yesterday. It was all the headlines yesterday. What do you say in response?
That's right, John. And President Trump is absolutely right. And he returns to Washington today after a historic NATO summit where he has gotten our NATO allies to finally pay their fair share thanks to his strong leadership on the world stage. And I'd like to take a step back and just acknowledge the history that has been made in the course of the last week thanks to President Trump's strength. 5 days ago, the rogue Iranian regime possessed the capability to create a nuclear weapon that threatened the United States, the state of Israel, and the entire world. And presidents for decades have said, dating back to Bill Clinton, that Iran cannot possess a nuclear weapon. And because of the decisive leadership of President Trump and the skill and the excellence of our United States military, that imminent threat to the United States and the world has been demolished because of the successful operation on Saturday night. And not only that, but within the span of 48 hours, President Trump was able to turn around and negotiate a successful ceasefire between Israel and Iran, ending this war after just 12 days. No other president in history could have ever dreamed of such a success, and that's exactly why the fake news media is now trying to demean and undermine the president. And we've seen this playbook be run before. You have hostile actors within the intelligence community who illegally leak bits and pieces of an intelligence assessment to push a fake news narrative. And that's what the CNN story was yesterday. And it's not a coincidence that it was written by the exact same CNN reporter who wrote the original story, falsely alleging that the Hunter Biden laptop was Russian disinformation. The American public are smarter than this, and they should know the truth. President Trump completely and totally obliterated the capability of Iran to produce a nuclear weapon, and the world is safer today because of his historic efforts.
So at that news conference in The Hague, the Defense Secretary Pete Hegseth went off on whoever leaked this and the media outlets that gobbled it up. Listen to what he said.
To spin it for their own political reasons, to try to hurt President Trump or our country. They don't care what the troops think. They don't care what the world thinks. They want to spin it to try to make him look bad based on a leak. Of course, we've all seen plenty of leakers. And what do leakers do? They have agendas. And what do? Do they share the whole information or just the part that they want to introduce?
Israel's Atomic Energy Commission had a completely different assessment of what happened at Fordo and Natanz than this preliminary low confidence assessment did. It said that the site was completely destroyed and that the nuclear program's been set back for years. I don't know if you saw it, but last hour we had former IAEA weapons inspector David Albright on, who said much the same thing.
Well, Secretary Hegseth is absolutely right. This was a low confidence preliminary intelligence assessment. The assessment itself said that it was not corroborated by anyone else in the intelligence community, and it has been disputed by not just the United States, the President, the Secretary of Defense, the Secretary of State, our Joint Chiefs, and our General Kane, who was incredibly successful in this mission on Saturday night. It was also disputed by both Israel and Iran. And CNN didn't care about that. The DIA themselves have now come out and said this was a preliminary report, and this CNN story got it completely wrong. But that reporter is a sheep, and she's a mouthpiece for people who don't like Donald Trump. And she only gave the White House an hour to respond. And that's, again, the same playbook we've seen the fake news media play time and time again. But this story has now been debunked widely by not just the United States, but also Iran and Israel as well.
All right, so there's the issue of reporting what was leaked, but then there's the idea of the leak itself. This was classified information. Here's what Steve Witkoff said about the leak.
Leaking that type of information, whatever the information, whatever site it comes out on, is outrageous. It's treasonous. So it ought to be investigated. There's no doubt that it was obliterated. So the reporting out there that in some ways suggests that we did not achieve the objective is just completely preposterous.
So Steve Witkoff says, and he's right in the middle of all of this and all these negotiations, said that this leak should be investigated. Will it be?
I am told by the FBI the leak already is being investigated, and it absolutely should be, because this was a top secret intelligence analysis that very few people in the United States government had access to see. And so I understand the FBI and the Department of Justice are already on this, as they should be. And just to emphasize what our great special envoy Witkoff said last night, for people with common sense, everyone knows what happens when you drop 14 30,000-pound bombs perfectly on their targets. It doesn't take an intelligence analysis to understand that means complete and total destruction and obliteration. And the President of the United States, because of his decisive leadership in directing that operation on Saturday night, has now achieved a goal that the United States and the whole world has wanted to achieve for years, and that's the obliteration of the capability of the Iranian regime to possess a nuclear weapon.
So there's one other question that remains out there, Caroline, and that's what happened to the nuclear material enriched to 60% that Iran already had in its possession. It's said to be about 900 pounds worth, enough for a number of bombs. The president believes that it was buried in one of those enrichment facilities. The director of the IAEA isn't so sure. Do you have evidence that you know exactly where it is?
I can tell you the United States had no indication that that enriched uranium was moved prior to the strikes, as I also saw falsely reported. But as for what's on the ground right now, it's buried under miles and miles of rubble because of the success of these strikes on Saturday evening. So anyone saying that they know just doesn't know. And what we do know is the capability of these weapons and the success of this strike, and the fact that the United States military hit their targets precisely, perfectly, and accurately, and we know what that means.
Well, again, David Albright, who's done this for a long time, knows what he's looking at, thinks that those bombs went down near ventilation shafts where the rock would have been less resistant than if you had just hit it out in the open. And he firmly believes that the centrifuge halls have been destroyed. So we'll see. Caroline Levitt, always great to catch up with you. Thank you so much. Appreciate it.
Thanks, John.
Thank you both. Good afternoon, everybody. I'm Martha McCallum, and this is the story. Iran admitting that U.S. and Israeli strikes, quote, badly damaged their nuclear facilities. Here is the foreign ministry spokesperson today.
Yes, our nuclear installations have been badly damaged. That's for sure, because it has come under repeated attacks by Israeli and American aggressors.
And then for Israel's part, they say that their assessment is that the strikes have set back Iran's nuclear program by, quote, many years. We know that intelligence by Israel in Iran has been very astute in recent weeks and months. So now President Trump saying that the United States and Iran will hold some discussions next week.
When I saw them starting to question the caliber of the attack, was it bad? Well, it was really bad. It was devastating. They obliterated. We destroyed the nuclear. In other words, it's destroyed. I said, Iran will not have nuclear. Well, we blew it up. It's blown up to kingdom come. I think the war ended, actually, when we hit the various nuclear sites with the planes.
I mean, that's an interesting part of that statement this morning. The president also posting that Iran, after the strikes that happened during Operation Midnight Hammer, the next thing that followed from Iran was that they gave the United States a heads up and said, we're going to be launching an attack, as ineffectual as it was, thankfully, on our base in Qatar, which suggests that it was a face-saving move for Iran, that they were really back on their heels, to say the least, at that point, but needed to demonstrate some sort of reaction for their home audience. Now, Brad Wenstrup is going to join us from the President's Intelligence Advisory Board. First, we go, though, to senior White House correspondent Peter Doocy, reporting live near The Hague in the Netherlands as we cover the NATO meetings. Hi, Peter.
And Martha, President Trump told us here that the United States has now collected additional intelligence on the ground in Iran since 24 hours ago, when that DIA assessment that was released with low confidence revealed that some Iranian nuclear facilities may have been intact.
They didn't see it. All they can do is take a guess. Now, if you take a look at the pictures, if you take a look how it's all blackened, you know the fire and brimstone is all underground because it's granite and it's all underground. You don't show it. But even there, with all of that being said, the whole area for 75 yards around the hole where it hit is black with fire.
The director of national intelligence, Tulsi Gabbard, now says new intelligence confirms what POTUS has stated numerous times. Iran's nuclear facilities have been destroyed. If the Iranians choose to rebuild, they would have to rebuild all three facilities, Natanz, Fordo, Esfahan, entirely, which would take years to do. The FBI leak investigation is ongoing, and a few minutes ago on Capitol Hill, we heard from the White House about how severely they want the person who leaked that DIA intel punished.
I understand the FBI is investigating who was the source of that leak because it's an illegal leak to CNN.
What kind of consequence could the leaker face?
They should go to jail.
Jail time. And the White House is hinting that they think the leak came from Capitol Hill, because we are also now told the White House is going to start limiting the classified information that they share with lawmakers as a direct result of this leak 24 hours ago. Martha.
Thank you very much, Peter.
It was the headlines that came out over the weekend, in part from CNN and New York Times. Early U.S. intelligence assessments suggest strikes on Iran did not destroy nuclear sites, sources say. Strike sets back Iran's nuclear program by only a few months, U.S. report says. It was based on a DIA early assessment with low confidence. We had it. We reported on it. Jennifer Griffin put out stuff on it, and we've covered it here on the show. The CIA director, John Ratcliffe, putting out a quote, CIA can confirm that a body of credible intelligence indicates Iran's nuclear program has been severely damaged by the recent targeted strikes. This includes new intelligence from an historically reliable and accurate source method that several key Iranian facilities were destroyed and would have to be rebuilt over the course of years. That's from the CIA director tonight. With that and all of this, let's bring in Fox News chief political analyst Brit Hume. Brit, good evening. You know, there's a lot of this back and forth, but there are kind of broader issues here to look at about the strike and the fallout from it.
Well, Brett, the best thing you can say about that preliminary report that leaked out yesterday was that it was very, very tentative and very, very early, and it was marked as low confidence. You know, there's only so much you can know about underground damage from massive bombing in the 48 or 72 hours after it happens, because in order to really know, you'd have to be in there. And nobody within the reach of the Defense Intelligence Agency that I've ever heard of would be in a position to assess that. But we had reporters working on this story, one in particular who works for CNN, who is a person who fell for the Steele dossier hook, line, and sinker, who wrote that the Hunter Biden laptop bought into the story that that was Russian disinformation. And so she wasn't working for CNN at the time. It's not clear to me how she ever got a job there, but CNN took her anyway, and now she's doing this kind of stuff. So, you know, I think that the subsequent intelligence reports we've heard about are more reliable, but, you know, this all has to await a longer-term situation in which somebody's going to have to get in there and really find out. But the Iranians themselves were saying today that their nuclear program was badly damaged. So maybe we ought to rest with that.
Yeah, the Iranians, actually the foreign minister put out a statement. The Israelis had a statement that matched what the U.S. officials were talking about. Here is David Albright. He's a former IAE investigator. He was on today.
We've been looking at satellite imagery during the last 2 weeks, and it's pretty devastating. I mean, a lot of their above ground facilities that are a critical part of a centrifuge program have been destroyed. So I think these reports that somehow there weren't centrifuges taken out are just incorrect.
But more broadly, Britt, the fact that the U.S. flew this package of B-2 bombers, dropped 420,000 pounds of ordnance on nuclear sites inside Iran. Not a single shot was fired, not a single Iranian jet got off the ground, and we got out of there and got back, suggests that we could do it again. And that was the message, not only for Iran, for China, for Russia, for the world.
Yeah, it was a reminder, if any were needed, that the United States military is the most proficient and powerful and technically equipped military on earth. You know, there's a sort of an attitude, Brett, a view that took hold in recent years to the effect that, you know, the United States really hasn't won a war since World War II. Well, that's nonsense. People cite, you know, the outcome in Iraq, and they cite the first Gulf War and the fact that Saddam stayed in power. The fact is, our military did not lose those wars. In fact, the first Gulf War was a walkover, and the second Gulf War, where we took down Saddam Hussein, was pretty much of a walkover too. Now, you can make an argument that, yeah, we won the war, we lost the peace, and maybe we did, but none of that is to take away from the extraordinary proficiency of our military forces and of the equipment that they use, the B-2 bomber being the most recent and most conspicuous example. The United States military is very good indeed, and one can only hope that the tyrants around the world who would dare want to challenge it would think better of it after what we've just seen over this past weekend.
Yes. Britt, as always, thank you.
Hey, Sean Hannity here. Hey, click here to subscribe to Fox News YouTube page and catch our hottest interviews and most compelling analysis. You will not get it anywhere else.